And we are live and on the air. This is Ed Dyer, and this is the TWIS Minion Science Island Hangout. Joining me is Dale. I'm going to call him Professor Dale, because he's going to understand more about our friend CRISPR-Cas9.
That's my favorite.
A couple of people have been... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just said that's my favorite subject.
Yes. It's an amazing technology. It's amazing the precision with which, I'll use that term, that can be controlled, and the things it can be used to do as far as gene splicing. It is really amazing. A couple of people couldn't make it. Amy was going to talk about our space news, well, our space news, and the primary story being the Antares rocket failure, but she's having problems with her PC, so it's got to be just me and Dale tonight.
All right.
So I'm going to attempt to go through the space news as best I can. And of course, the big story was the Antares rocket failure. I didn't get to watch it live. Had to be shocking if you saw it live. The main thing is, as much fuel and as much energy there was involved in that particular explosion when the rocket hit the ground, nobody got hurt. And as far as I've read, there's been no problem with any kind of debris. So that's kind of that's the main thing. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from some articles. This one by Brett Rawcliffe from Spaceflight Insider. And this is yesterday. Shortly after the incident, the space agency confirmed that no personnel had been injured and everyone was accounted for. The damage is limited to the launch pad and the facilities, including property and vehicles. Ooh, some vehicles got smashed. Orbital has stated that the damage is restricted to the southern end of Wallops Island, and fire teams are in place to secure the perimeter of the crash. So it's 8,500 feet. That's not a large perimeter, considering, again, the amount of energy that was involved in that particular explosion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Far too early to know the details of what happened. They're looking into it, and I'm going to guess it'll be more than a week, maybe a couple of weeks. Now, the one thing is they have instruments. They have all the instruments hooked up to that rocket so they could follow the exact sequence of what was happening. The bad thing is, I got to believe they have absolutely no physical evidence. I mean, that thing went up, and I don't think they're going to find anything that's going to help them as far as physical evidence from the rocket itself. At present, and this is as of yesterday, it is not known if either the Antares AJ-26 engines might be the cause of the accident. In May of this year, an Aerojet Rocketdyne AJ-26 rocket, and this is, I guess this is the Russian one, produced by Kuznetsov Design Bureau, failed on a test stand in NASA's Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. Aerojet Rocketdyne purchased more than 40 of these NK-33 engines in the 1990s, and Orbital has purchased 20 of these engines for use on Antares. Aerojet Rocketdyne has upgraded the engines by adding, among other things, electronics and a gambling steering capability. And it's also recently reported that Orbital is seeking other engines from Antares for use in Antares. I guess they've been using this particular rocket for a while, so it doesn't necessarily mean we should stop using it until, obviously, they find out exactly what caused the problem. The AJ-26 has experienced one prior failure in June of 2011 when an engine caught fire on the same E1 test stand as the May 24th accident. Okay, the 2011 failure was determined was determined to be caused by a fuel leak resulting in stress corrosion cracking of the 40-year-old metal. 40-year-old metal. These are not new, I guess. Wow.
Well, I have another article that. Did you hear about Elon Musk? When he talked about
I
the
don't remember.
Antares rocket, and so the title of this one is NASA rocket explosion. Elon Musk predicted disaster for Antares 2 years ago. And it says the explosion of the Orbital Sciences Antares rocket on Tuesday evening was foreseen by SpaceX CEO Elon Musk more than 2 years ago. In an interview with Wired magazine in 2012, Musk called the Orbital Science rocket a joke, and he called into question the contract that NASA awarded for it to resupply the International Space Station. And they quote him here saying, one of our competitors, Orbital Sciences, has a contract to resupply the International Space Station, the ISS, and their rocket honestly sounds like the punchline to a joke, Musk said. It uses rocket engines that were made in the 60s. I don't mean their design is from the 60s. I mean they start with engines that were literally made in the 60s and like packed away in Siberia somewhere. Wow.
I mean, I'll make a prediction. There will be another rocket launch failure. I predict that. Nah, I'm not going to tell you when.
Okay, who though? Whose rocket's going to fail?
All of them. Russia's going to fail. The United States is going to have one. At least one. China is going to have one. They're all going to have rocket failures. Technology, you know? I mean, it's the worst situation was with the astronauts, when they were killed. That can happen. I think, again, we get complacent. We can go online on NASA and we can watch these launches and, they almost seem like routine, but they're not routine. Accidents are going to happen. There will be another accident, I don't know when, and it will involve, maybe a rocket that has astronauts, on top of it. People are going to die. It's inevitable. But I do agree sort of with Musk when he's talking about, we are talking these rockets. They're old rockets. But I have to believe that they're thoroughly tested. Given the fact they've only had, they've had the 2 failures on the test stand where they're supposed to happen. And this is the first one they've had, apparently, in the United States, Orbital, where they were actually launching it. I don't know. It would be nice if the United States government was willing to spend bazillions of dollars, $18 million NASA budget. Well, let's make that $180 billion. Then I'm going to guess they can build some amazing rockets that may not fail. But they're not going to do it. They shouldn't do it. Yeah, I mean, government's got to spend money on other stuff. I want to see them spend more money on NASA, but, I don't know. I am rambling.
Yeah, to me, I think I get a feeling from Elon Musk that I think he's the type of person that I don't think he has time for bullshit. I think he strikes me as the type of person that he says what's on his mind. I think he's really direct, and I think he believes what he's saying. And it's probably, I bet it's not too far from the truth. This, like 1960s, that's 50 plus years. Like that can't be good. Anything sitting there, especially metals, and they weren't using any advanced composites at the time. They have to be probably all retrofitted and with new materials that wasn't probably designed with that spec in mind, because the advanced composites now. So they're I don't know.
Yeah, it's again. Well, take for instance all those ICBMs we've got. You know, now they're old. I don't know exactly how old they are. I'm going to guess they're at least 30 years old, maybe 40, and they can't be tested. You
No,
can't test them.
no, we don't want to test them.
And I know every once in a while you get a congressman who says, you know, we got to replace them. You know, realistically, you know, I think they're there for a threat. That's all they're there for.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. We've got them. Russia's got them. China's got them. So we can threaten each other. So nobody's going to start a nuclear war. But you know, it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect if we decided to don't go to war and everybody pressed the button and nothing happened.
Just a bunch of mad people in different rooms throughout the world and no firepower. Nothing works.
Now, there was an article in Christian Science Monitor that talked about, really, I guess, we don't need to change the system that much. And it says the presence of a second company, Space Exploration Technology Corps, with a different rocket, launch site, and cargo capability points to a more robust resupply system for NASA than it would have had with either a single company or its own rockets. So this is using subcontractors and using private. A launch failure is a dramatic, expensive, visceral event, acknowledges Clarissa Christensen, founder and managing partner of the TAURI Group, an aerospace and defense contract consulting firm in Alexandria, Virginia, but one failure does not necessarily suggest a systematic problem. It's a commercial launch, more or less prone to failure. It's a commercial launch which is neither more or less prone to failure than a government launch. The loss of the rocket and its cargo is a signal to pay attention. Yes, repeat. She notes that the Russian Proton rockets, modified over the decades to become that country's workhorse for government and commercial launches, have experienced 6 failures since December of 2010. No, so what? I don't care what the Russians are doing. I don't care what we're doing. This is a good thing. Having infrastructure in multiple places, Virginia, Florida, and now SpaceX is building a private pad in Texas. Private pad? It's somebody's private pad. They're going to makes a big difference. That's one of the encouraging things. We don't just have one place, Cape Canaveral. We now have multiple launch sites.
Yep.
Another analyst, Marco Coresius, says to create a system, you have to have a goal. The goal we're creating right now is to supply the space station and give companies like SpaceX and Orbital experiencing carrying cargo, docking in space, loading and unloading. Now you've got a system. If the current plans pan out, and then in 3 or 4 years, they will expand to a human transportation system with SpaceX and Boeing ferrying astronauts to and from the station. That sounds like he's saying if plans pan out, 3 or 4 years is not that long ago. There's going to be a lot of regular flights, I guess, happening, he thinks. This lays the foundation for companies such as Las Vegas-based Bigelow Aerospace to lift inflatable modules it has developed that either could be added to the space station or serve as the basis for on-orbit tourist destinations or as laboratories for corporate R&D. Step by step, we're creating a network.
I'm with Chris Hadfield. He said, forget Mars. Just forget about it. Too expensive, too complicated, too big of a goal. Let's just go to the moon. Let's put a base on the moon. I like that. Exponentially simpler. than trying to put people on Mars. Let's go to the moon first, but let's populate the moon. Let's see how we do.
If you're talking about mining, yes. If you're talking about a habitat, yes. Then I agree with them. If we're talking about an interesting environment, a dynamic environment, Moon's not it. Mars has more of a dynamic environment. And if long term, I think a place like Mars, because it has more resources, is a better long-term habitat for humans. But I'm talking long-term.
Mm-hmm.
We could do it, I guess. We could do it on the moon. We could probably have a habitat on the moon in, I don't know, 10 years.
Well, we had it in 1999. It was Moonbase Alpha.
What are the challenges of habitat on the moon? We're still exposed to radiation. So you got to work out that long-term radiation problem.
Caves.
Now you're talking technology that's living in caves. You got to dig out the caves. Now you're talking 20 years into the future.
Well, the caves exist. They found cave complexes on the moon.
Okay.
So you have an inflatable habitat that goes into the cave, and so your shielding comes from the cave complex itself, and then your habitat is just inflated inside. Now, once you're underground, you can begin, carving things out, and your mining can occur down there. Hopefully you get lucky and there's some sort of veins of rare minerals or something.
And you are getting experience in living in space, living in an environment outside Earth. That's true. You're gaining experience for when you do go to more places like Mars. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then maybe Mars is the next stepping stone after that. Once we refine the technology. At least it's with the moon, it's not that long of a trip. How many days does it take to get to the moon? Do you remember?
No clue. I'm going to say 6, but I have no idea. But this is the internet. This is the internet, so I will go on to, I will ask the question. How many days to get to the moon?
Siri, how many days does it take to get to the moon?
Shit, Siri.
Okay, give me a moment.
Read it. I don't want to read it.
Wow,
Slowest. Did Siri answer you?
Which Jerry? Len Perry or Carrie Pelser?
Siri's a little bit confused. Yeah, Siri was a flop.
It says here the slowest mission to fly to the moon was actually one of the most advanced technologies to be sent into space. The ES Smart 1 lunar probe. That took 1 year, 1 month, and 2 weeks, and that was in 2003. The fastest, the SMART mission is an oddity and is by far the longest mission to the moon. The rest of the missions took a matter of days to reach lunar orbit. Manned mission would be 3 days, 3 hours, and 49 minutes. So it's 3-4 days.
So yeah, that's a lot easier to bite off. I mean, even if there was an issue there, you could have a resupply mission ready to go to resupply them with whatever they needed, including other people resources. Yeah.
The more I think about it, the more you talk about it, the more sense it does make. probably psychological reasons. It's Mars.
I guess so.
It could be you could go to Congress and maybe they'll buy into a Mars mission. You might get more public support for a Mars mission than an ordinary, just, oh, let's go to the moon. Well, we can go to the moon. What's the big deal? But, you know, actually that does make a lot more sense. Let's do it slowly, but do it right. What's the rush?
Yeah.
The rush is I want to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, at least we're not in low Earth orbit anymore.
Maybe that's part of it. It's, if we start with the moon, and then we put off Mars, we're probably talking 30 or 40 years before we actually get to Mars. That puts me over 100. I'm dead. Maybe not. No, not Will. Well, maybe if medical science steps in, I can live to 100.
I think in the next, we're going to see amazing things in the next 10 to 15 years.
I don't have a clue what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years, except it will be amazing. That's exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally amazing.
Okay. Professor Dale.
Uh-huh.
Let us talk about something truly amazing and awesome. The CRISPR-Cas 9. What do you call that?
Is that the wiki one that you're talking about?
I'm going to story number... Oh, wiki. I'm going to start with wiki, because I've got some questions. That's where I'm hoping you can explain this perhaps better, or at least see if I understand it. So we've got two stories. First, we're going to talk about this CRISPR-R, exactly what it is, and then I've got another story where some researchers at the University of North Carolina, they co-opt an immune system already present in bacteria to turn off specific genes or sets of genes, creating a powerful tool for future research. So they use CRISPR-Cas. All right, and I'm gonna read some parts of Wikipedia, and then we can talk in some more detail about stuff that could be that's confusing. Right off the bat, the name CRISPRs, clustered, regulatory, interspaced, short, palindromic repeats. Actually, I can understand basically how those words fit together. So it's a DNI loci containing short repetitions of base sequences. Each repetition is followed by a short segment of spacer DNA, non-coding DNA, from previous exposures to a virus. So am I correct in saying that when these non-coding DNA spacers are the result of exposures to viruses?
I'm just reading through this here. So each repetition is followed by short... You're on the Wikipedia article, right?
Yeah, I'm viewing it, and I cut out a lot of parts. I cut out the parts, but go ahead.
Yeah, so each repetition is followed by short segments of spacer DNA from previous exposures to a virus. So we have viral information within our DNA, is what they're saying. And the repetition, those repeats, regularly interspaced. Just 1 second here. I'm just answering somebody at work. Un momento. Sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, what they're saying is we all have bits of DNA from viruses that they can identify, and they're using that as spacers. So,
Okay,
yeah.
um, are there spacer DNA? Well, there's non-coding DNA that we don't, that is not involved, that we didn't get because we got a virus. Is that correct? Is
Say
this a
that one.
naturally occurring thing, or do we only get this spacer DNA, non-coding DNA, because we've been exposed to a virus?
Yeah, when you're exposed to a virus, it can change your DNA. It can alter things. It can mutate us,
Oh,
literally.
that yes. But is that the only, as far as we know, it's only through virus exposure that we have these spacer DNA? Is that only because of a virus, or is it something that's also naturally occurring?
Well, these they can identify by their code, right? So the repetitions, followed by the spacer
Okay.
DNA.
Okay.
Yeah, they can look at the code and they can even trace it back to um, a specific virus itself. So, like, there's a good diagram here, and what they're showing, the cell membrane is like the outside wall of the cell, and they're basically showing the viral, double-stranded viral DNA going into the system. And then they show the Cas part of it, so the CRISPR-Cas, and what they're doing is that Cas binds to that portion of the DNA, and it creates a novel spacer. So, but what they mean is it has a particular code, right?
So they're
And
only targeting viral DNA.
yeah, they use a virus basically is how it passes through the cell membrane wall. When you want to rewrite any sort of DNA, you have to get inside the cell membrane. And as far as I know, the most effective way to do that right now is using a virus. But lots of people think in terms of the flu virus and stuff like that. But you got to think of a virus as just something that can be reprogrammed to carry a payload into the cell, and that's how they get it in there, is through that viral target.
Okay.
So it's attaching to the cell membrane, and it comes in, and it bonds with that Cas enzyme, I believe it is, and creates a novel spacer. So in the CRISPR array, that then is transcribed, and again, this gets pretty detailed.
Yeah, there's a few other paragraphs in here. You can go over it, certainly, obviously, but then I've got some other paragraphs I want to talk about. Well, maybe we can get into more detail. But go ahead, explain. It is an interesting diagram.
It is, yeah. Like I wouldn't mind keep going through the article, because I think they're referring to the diagram as they go. Is more.
Okay.
So the CRISPRs are found in approximately 40% of sequenced bacteria. So these regularly interspaced repeats. It's in bacterial genomes, and 90% of sequenced archaea. So CRISPRs are often associated with Cas genes that code for proteins related to CRISPRs. So the CRISPR-Cas system is a prokaryotic immune system that confers resistance to foreign genetic elements, such as plasmids and phages, and provides a form of acquired immunity. So the immunity, I believe what they're talking about is it has the ability to create an immune response, and I think what they might be talking about is rewriting on demand that portion of the code that's been changed. So So CRISPR spacers recognize and cut these exogenous genetic elements in a manner analogous to RNA interference in eukaryotic organisms. So the CRISPR spacers recognize and cut the genetic element in a very targeted manner. And the difference is it can do this thousands of times accurately and cheaply compared to older techniques. So since 2013,
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but it's the targeting aspect and the precision with which they could do this.
yeah, it really is amazing. It's turned us into hard drives that we don't understand how to write yet.
Can they? I wonder if they can look in some kind of electron microscope and actually see this happening.
I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you resequence after the editing's been done, and you look at what's there, and it's like, yep, it changed precisely the way we wanted that specific vector to change. So it's been used, it's only 2013 that it's been used for gene editing, so adding, disrupting, or changing the sequence of specific genes, and gene regulation in species throughout the tree of life. By delivering the Cas9 protein and appropriate guide RNAs, the organism's genome can be cut at any desired location. So
okay, let's start with that. Stop a bit. That sentence where they're linking the Cas9 protein and appropriate guide RNA. So they're linking these two things together.
That's right. So the Cas9 is a protein that basically can cleave the DNA at a specific location.
How do they bind the Cas9 protein and the guide RNAs?
I don't know. I know that specific protein, it basically iterates through the DNA itself. It can travel along the DNA, and when it sees the specific sequence of code that it's targeted for, it will cleave at that exact position. How it happens, I don't know if that's even well described, other than it does happen.
Okay.
So, like, I've seen really nice animations of different things, like even stuff like ribosomes, how they function, and it's very robotically, like ticker tape going through a machine, like being guided through a machine. It's pretty amazing. Maybe
machine is software. You just have to understand the software.
Yeah, I like Craig Venter. He always talks about it as DNA is software that creates hardware, and that's really what it is.
Yeah.
You know, we created, like when we think of computers, we create hardware, and then you load the software in it. This one, you have the software, and it creates the hardware, which is what we are. So it may be possible to use CRISPR to build RNA-guided gene drives capable of altering the genomes of entire populations. Yeah, this could go in so many different directions. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So they do get into like the locus structure for the repeats and the spacers, and again the Cas gene. There's a bunch of different ones there. I'm not sure what they all do, but CRISPR loci range in size from 24 to 48 base pairs, and they show some dyad symmetry, implying the formation of a secondary structure such as a hairpin, but are not truly palindromic. Repeats are separated by spacers of similar length. Some CRISPR spacer sequence exactly match sequences from plasmids and phages, although some spacers match the prokaryote's genome self-targeting spacers. New spacers can be added rapidly in response to phage infection. So, and they actually show the shape of the CRISPR protein on the right, on the bottom, its structure,
Mm-hmm.
And the Cas2, I believe, is just below that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great article on it, hey? Lots of
Yes.
information.
We don't need to read the whole thing. It's giving us some background, and as I say, every time I go over this, I understand it a little better. The linking of this protein, Cas9, to the guide RNA, kind of.
Say that again. The CRISPR.
Yeah, where you're linking the Cas9 protein and to the guide RNA. You have to. Is the RNA the RNA? Is that going to be? How does that target a particular part of the genome?
Well, they compared it to RNAi, RNA interference, and what they do is they inhibit gene expression.
Okay, it's RNAi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and what they'll do is other mRNA sequences, they'll target those, and that's where it inhibits things. So you have the mRNA floating around there, and you have RNA interference basically canceling out the mRNA, I believe.
I don't know if you read it already. There's one sentence here talking about this guy Martin Jenick, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, combined trace RNA and spacer RNA into a single guide RNA molecule. Okay.
Oh, so he has it all down to one molecule.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
that I can visualize. Then mixed with this protein, CAS9, so you start with the RNA molecule, and then you mix in this protein, can find and cut the correct DNA targets. That sentence clarifies things.
for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, that's and it's all happening at a level where you really can't, it's mathematical in nature almost.
Can you imagine just trying to conduct the experiment? But you can't see what's going on. Let's do something. Will it happen? Probably not 10,000 times. And then the 11,000th time, hey, it happened.
Well, I like even the simple stuff where, if you look at Craig Venter when shotgun sequencing, when they invented it, whoever would have thought that, basically you take some DNA and you smash it into little tiny pieces, and then sample the whole thing and have a computer reconstruct it. That's how it was done. That's pretty amazing. And I think shotgun sequencing started in, I think it was the 80s or 90s. Maybe I'm way off, but it was a while ago. And who thinks of these things? Yeah, let's just smash it all up and see if a computer can, reassemble all the information. Pretty amazing.
I wonder, you talked about this last week. That could be an example, or examples where you don't really know what you're going to get. You may have an idea of what you're going to get, but you don't really know. So the time and money you put into your experiment, maybe it doesn't work out, or maybe it works out in a completely different way. It's an adventure.
Yeah.
An adventure that costs buckets of money. But
Yeah, like they did have stuff prior to this CRISPR-Cas9, they used zinc finger nucleases. But again, from what I was told by people that actually used these processes, extremely hard to do, expensive, slow, and not accurate. Talons came later, and that they could target DNA, and I think it was they thought that would kind of surpass the zinc finger nucleotides. And then all of a sudden this CRISPR-Cas9 came out of nowhere and just blew everybody away. And yeah, it's made us into, the best way I have to describe it is we're moving towards a place where, as we understand the human genome, we're basically like hard drives that can be updated. We can update our software, which is just completely bizarre.
And I think we're both optimistic because we can see, we're following it, we can see how the information and the information we're getting, the processes we're developing, it's exponential. And where maybe in the past you thought something might take 10 years, now it's only going to take 4 or 5 maybe.
Yeah, and if you link that into all these other technologies that are coming, like once they can create a reasonable AI that's a little better than Watson, not much better, a little better. Watson's already moving science forward in a major way. As that gets better, they're quickly going to decode, I think, the human genome, and that's that exponential track that we're on. So, yeah, next 10 to 15 years, I think, is going to be very interesting. Now, they always say that there's I forget who I heard this from, but just looking historically, when discoveries are made, they always say that at the very beginning, everybody's over-optimistic, and then after that, it comes back in line a few years later where people are, okay, we were over-optimistic, we thought we were going to solve all the world's problems. Then you have kind of a time of more practical, and then we underestimate a little later on, and things happen quicker than we assume as technologies come on board. And if you think of, did that happen with a cell phone? In the beginning, everybody thought it was going to be amazing, but it was slow to be adopted in the beginning, and it wasn't that impressive, really. It was hit and miss early on. And then people got a lot more practical about, okay, I might not be getting a cell phone myself for a few more years. And then it exploded. Now every, third world countries, there's cell phones that are ubiquitous, so it's awesome.
Maybe it's hard to predict. Think of like, well, to me, even laptop technology. So you started with this PC, then you moved to laptops. Now you're moving to phones, and some phones are almost as powerful as a laptop. There are people who are people have replaced their PCs with a laptop. Now they're like an iPad, and now they're replacing that with a cell phone-like device. I mean, the latest, I was looking at Apple 6, and the Apple 6 something, I forget what. But you have 128 gigabytes on this little device you got in your hand. Wow.
Yeah, I'm amazed where we're at right now. I'm with you. The power we have in the palm of our hand is pretty...
You're talking to Siri. Now she doesn't quite understand you, and there's a bit of a communication problem. But, I mean, you couldn't do that 3 years ago?
That's right.
You couldn't do it at all. So 3 years from now, you look at how much that's going to be perfected. Instead of now where I have to go looking at Wikipedia or something, you got that little device in your hand, you say, Siri, tell me what the answer to this question is, and it gives it to you.
Well, I think you won't even ask. I think Siri will be monitoring what you're thinking and saying, and it'll step up and say, hey, I think you need to know this information right now. Or I took the, I made your restaurant reservations for you,
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Oh, I think so. I think it's all going to be there. Maybe not the
Oh,
next
have all the
few.
information on you. You're right. And it will be able to construct a conversation and it'll know what you are doing right now, basically.
Yep.
Um, and think of, with quantum computers, you'll be able to do thought experiments. You eliminate the lab, and all the lab work gets done by a quantum computer.
Yeah, we'll be accessing parallel worlds.
That's that. I mean, got to put a lab. Well, you got to put a lot of lab workers out of work, but I don't know anybody who really likes working in a lab. They all want to go on to be researchers or something. So that'll be a good thing. I'm going to cover one story. University of North Carolina using this CRISPR-Cas system. This is University of North Carolina State have developed a technique that co-opts an immune system already present in bacteria and archaea that turn off specific genes or sets of genes, creating a powerful tool for future research. The technique works by hijacking a microbe's own CRISPR-Cas system. The system normally protects bacteria from invaders such as viruses by creating small strands of RNA called CRISPR RNAs, which match DNA sequences specific to a given invader. In the most common type of CRISPR-Cas system called type 1 system, a CRISPR RNA and a set of proteins tightly latch onto a matching sequence of DNA. Once bound, the proteins signal for another protein called Cas3 that cuts up the DNA. It's amazing. Our approach was to modify the type 1 system in two ways. First, we edit the microbe's genome to prevent it from producing Cas3. Then we introduce synthetic DNA that produces our customized CRISPR RNAs. These customized RNAs include complementary sequences that are tailored to match up with specific DNA sequences in the microbe's genome. When a gene is turned on, it transcribes specific RNAs that a cell used to make proteins. But when the customized CRISPR RNA latch onto a specific gene, these genes are turned off or blocked from transcribing RNAs. The team was able to introduce both individual CRISPR RNAs and groups of CRISPR RNAs that were chained together, allowing them to target multiple genes at the same time.
Wow.
Some of these genes enable the microbes to consume different sugars. By controlling which genes were turned off, the team could dictate which triggers the microbes could consume.
Wow.
And let's see, this technique will allow researchers to better understand the role of individual genes or sets of genes by simply turning these genes off. And this approach could be used in conjunction with high throughput screening techniques to identify gene sets associated with proteins such as multi-drug resistance or benefits, like those related to probiotics. In addition, because the associated genes aren't destroyed, there are no Cas3 proteins to chop them up. The technique can allow the genes to turn back on. This is done by halting the production of CRISPR RNAs, which allow affected genes to begin transcribing again as the microbes reproduce, and the remaining CRISPR and RNAs degrade.
That's sci-fi.
That is. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's just blows me away. So now everybody's jumping all over this, and they're refining techniques. Like there's not
Yes.
the one technique anymore. There's multiple ways of doing this.
And the ability to do what this North Carolina team state did, I mean, what was that, 2 years, 3 years? In 2 or 3 years, and now look what these guys at North Carolina State University are doing, turning it on and turning it off like a little switch now.
Yeah. Yeah, like they're suppressing the gene that causes the Cas3 that does the destruction, and then like they're manipulating life at will. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as we learn more about and understand all these genetic pathways and you know what they used to call junk DNA, as we understand it all, we'll become a mechanical system.
Yeah, well, but these, you know, the system these people have created, well, they're putting in their own little system in there, and they can manipulate that at anytime they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also not destroying the gene's capability. They can just, you know, go back to let the gene's capability back to what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Rewriting life at will.
Anybody else messaging us? No, they are not. Okay. Let's see. Well, we can't have a week go by without an Ebola story. This is actually some positive news, some positive research. I don't know, I forget where people who did this. This is which story is it? That's 2B. Genetic factors behind surviving or dying from Ebola. People exposed to Ebola vary on how the virus affects them. Excuse me. In fact, Dale. I got genes on my mind now. Dale, maybe you could read this story?
Okay, you're on the one I popped up, genetic factors behind surviving or dying from Ebola mouse study?
That's the one.
So a newly developed mouse model suggests that genetic factors are behind the mild to deadly range of reactions to the Ebola virus. People exposed to Ebola vary in how the virus affects them. Some completely resist the disease, others suffer moderate to severe illness and recover, while those who are most susceptible succumb to bleeding, organ failure, and shock. In earlier studies of populations of people who have contracted Ebola, these differences are not related to any specific changes in the Ebola virus itself that made it more or less dangerous. Instead, the body's attempts to fight infection seems to determine disease severity. In the October 30th edition of Science, scientists describe strains of laboratory mice bred to test the role of an individual's genetic makeup in the course of Ebola disease. Systems biologist and virologist Angela Rasmussen and Michael Cates from the Cates Laboratory at the University of Washington Department of Microbiology led the study in collaboration with the National Institutes of Health's Rocky Mountain Laboratories in Montana and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Research on Ebola prevention and treatment has been hindered by the lack of a mouse model that replicates the main characteristics of human Ebola hemorrhagic fever. The researchers had originally obtained this genetically diverse group of inbred laboratory mice to study locations on mouse genomes associated with influenza severity. The research was conducted in a highly secure, state-of-the-art biocontainment safety level 4 laboratory in Hamilton, Montana.
Not too far from you, right?
yeah, not too far. The scientists examined mice that they infected with a mouse form of the same species of Ebola virus causing the 2014 West Africa outbreak. The study was done in full compliance with federal, state, and local safety and biosecurity regulations. This type of virus has been used several times before in research studies. Nothing was done to change the virus. Interestingly, conventional laboratory mice previously infected with this virus died, but did not develop symptoms of Ebola hemorrhagic fever. In the present study, all the mice lost weight in the first few days after infection. 19% of the mice were unfazed. They not only survived, but also fully regained their lost weight within 2 weeks. They had no gross pathological evidence of disease. Their livers looked normal. 11% were partially resistant, and less than half of these died. 70% of the mice had a greater than 50% mortality. 19% of this last group had liver inflammation without classic symptoms of Ebola, and 34% had blood that took too long to clot, a hallmark of fatal Ebola hemorrhagic fever in humans. Those mice also had internal bleeding, swollen spleens, and changes in liver color and texture. The scientists correlated disease outcomes and variations in mortality rates to specific genetic lines of mice. The frequency of different manifestations of the disease across the lines of these mice screens so far are similar in variety and proportion to the spectrum of clinical disease observed in the 2014 West African outbreak, Rasmussen said. While acknowledging that recent Ebola survivors may have had immunity to this or a related virus that saved them during this epidemic, Kate said, our data suggests that genetic factors play a significant role in disease outcome. In general, when virus infection frenzied the genes involved in promoting blood vessel inflammation and cell death, serious or fatal disease followed. On the other hand, survivors experienced more activity in genes that order blood vessel repair and the production of infection-fighting white blood cells. The scientists note that certain specialized types of cells in the liver could also have limited virus reproduction and put a damper on systemic inflammation and blood clotting problems in resistant mice. Susceptible mice had widespread liver infection, which may explain why they had more virus in their bodies and poorly regulated blood coagulation. The researchers also noticed that spleens in the resistant and susceptible mice took alternate routes to try to ward off infection. We hope that medical researchers will be able to rapidly apply these findings to candidate therapeutics and vaccines, Kate says. They believe this mouse model can be promptly implemented to find genetic markers, conduct meticulous studies on how symptoms originate and take hold, and evaluate drugs and that have a broad-spectrum antiviral activities against all Zaire Ebola viruses, including the one responsible for the current West African epidemic. So that's pretty cool.
That could be extremely helpful, and the kind of thing that if you can tell an individual's genetic, not only genetic predisposition to a particular disease, but predict how it would react severely, less severely to being infected with that virus.
We'll take it a step further, and once you identify, the human beings, what genetic code makes survivability so probable, the ones that don't have that ability, in the future, maybe with CRISPR-Cas9, we can rewrite it into the genome.
Yes.
Exciting times.
I remember reading about what's the big fever? The Black Death. And there were people who survived the Black Death, and their descendants completely immune to like AIDS and HIV. They've got that genetic inheritance, so that they're immune. And we could find out what's that little code. What is it that they've got that, and let's give it to everybody else.
Yep. Well, how about rewriting our normal cells and rewriting a certain amount of them back into their undifferentiated stem cell-like state, so that that's the fountain of youth, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, that may be where this goes ultimately.
Yeah. And I'll also guess that when we have our supercomputers, the bacteria and the viruses have their incredible capability to adapt to any kind of environment, which they have evolved over millions and millions of years, and we'll knock off a particular virus, and it'll evolve. There'll be one little critter that'll survive, and then we'll have to do some more research, and it's going to be an arms race. What I'm getting
I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it'll happen. I think with what we have now is directed evolution, and if we attain a sufficient understanding of our genome, it doesn't matter how any virus or anything mutates, you simply rewrite the code. So that will only happen, though, if our understanding is at a very, very high level of what exactly all the functions of the human genome is. There won't be any warfare because it's just code in the end. Whether it's a virus or bacteria or any sort of life comes down to A, C, G, and T. And it's just a sequence of A, C, G, and T. Once we find out, oh, it mutated, okay, well, we're just going to rewrite it. It's software.
In that regard, I'm not quite as optimistic as you.
Yeah, well, we could have where we could have an arms race is we could have a directed evolution arms race where human beings want to kill each other, and we're both directing evolution in such a way trying to do that. But then anytime someone comes up with a better line of code, you know, it's the old, you know, building a better gun, and then you build a better bulletproof vest, and you keep going back and forth. Maybe that'll happen.
Well, as you talked about the advances that are going to happen with quantum computers, it's really hard to argue against what you're saying.
Well, I'm hoping, like I'm really hoping that I haven't been fooled by D-Wave. I hope, I think they have something very special. It's not the best quantum computer that's out there that could be created, because it's limited, but for what it can do and what it could bring to humanity very, very quickly is amazing. Even though it won't, you know, serve us like the premium quantum computer that everybody wants to have, it's going to solve some pretty important problems if it's real. 2015, we're going to find out.
Look how quickly they've made progress.
Yeah.
3 or 4. Their new version is what, 3 or 4 times more, 5 times more powerful, a factor of 100, in fact. I think if you read that article a couple of weeks ago, so they're making pretty rapid progress.
Yeah. So we're gonna know. Like this next round should crush any sort of conventional computers that are out there. And if it doesn't do that,
in just 3 years, if that turns out to be true, in 5. You're going to have a bunch of companies investing in that technology.
Yeah.
Because now, you know, people can go the cloud. You put that in the cloud, and everybody can, and you know, a whole bunch of people can access it.
Well, when we reach the singularity and we have these massive supercomputing complexes that can answer any question, my question will be, why are we here?
Well, aren't you? That's the. Oh my God, I can't think of the book, the trilogy. Oh my God, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what you're talking about.
Okay.
They asked the computer. What is it, the mice or something? And they spent bazillions of dollars, and they asked the computer the question, and they were finished. It's I don't know what it asked them. You know, what's the right question or something, and they had to do the whole process again. I don't remember the story, but that's the kind of thing. It's the question. So the problem isn't going to be finding the answer. The problem is going to be coming up with the questions.
Yeah, I think and that could happen sooner rather than later if this quantum adiabatic quantum system is real. What do you ask it?
And that's, I don't remember where I read it, but when I first started working, my job was to analyze systems and make recommendations on how they could be changed. But it always came down to drilling down to the central question, getting rid of all the noise, and if you can drill down to the central question, then you're onto something. But that can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Very, very, very difficult when you have a noisy system to pull out. But that's what quantum computers do. Essentially, if you take an inherently noisy system with a lot of data points, and you're looking for that one data point amongst trillions, that is what a quantum computer does. It locates with a high probability that single data point.
I'm going to drift off to conversation. Were you in? Did you watch the This Week in Science show yesterday?
I didn't.
The post show. Our friend Justin got into a huge discussion about religion and science. But even there, what I can see is you have someone who believes in religious faith, someone who is a scientist, throwing questions at each other, not listening, and not getting down to the central question, because they're not, there's the noise. They're not listening to each other. And I think it's the same kind of a thing. You've got to get down to that central question and get rid of all the noise.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you have two people that are diametrically opposed and you find that question, the loser, the one who's wrong, will not want to answer that question.
Absolutely. So many of the reasons why we have problems that are not resolved is because of that. Addressing your grant, let's take a simple thing like Russia and Ukraine. It would, I mean, what they're going through now logically doesn't make any sense. You've got two large countries. One country has oil. They have to pass that oil through the other country. The country with the oil is very rich. The country where the pipeline goes through is not quite so rich. They could use some help. So you have a little section of one of the countries. You got a bunch of Russians living in one part of this country that's called part of the Ukraine, but they really think they're Russians. So you got this whole conflict going on. But you would think the two countries would be able, just thinking in purely economic terms, would be able to get down together and figure out a solution, forgetting about politics and everything. Let's just work out what's in our own best interest. A war is certainly not in anybody's best interest. If the Ukraine, I mean, you have this little itty bitty part of the country. Okay, so the Ukrainians say, okay, Russian, the citizens living in our part of the Ukraine, you can be part of Russia. And maybe there's some Ukrainians living there. Well, you move out of there, and now you change the border. Never going to happen, probably, because the Ukrainians are never going to let it happen. But that makes sense to me. The Crimea, everybody complained because the Russians took over Crimea. Crimea is like 90% Russian. You know, it made sense to me.
Well, we need countries. If you think 50 years into the future, and that's tough to do. But do we need countries at all? Do we need borders?
No. John Lennon had it right. Let's get rid of countries.
Yeah, we'll just, and you know what? The internet allows for a grassroots groundswell to control and dictate. That's why all these leadership regimes over the past 10 years have fallen, because people just, they don't, you know, they gather and they chat, they talk, and that's powerful.
Are there, look at the United States and Canada, we share a pretty long border. can you almost think of any other two countries anywhere else in the world who get along as well as we do? Yeah, probably, but that's hard. Pretty hard to figure out two countries. What disputes do we have?
Yeah, not much. Yeah, not much. It's kind of, yeah, like even in my day to day, like so. With the courses that I'm taking right now for like the tower climbing and high angle rescue and all that stuff, the way you're prepared, if you volunteer for an organization that like Red Cross, International Red Cross, you're already thinking in terms of internationally assisting others with your training. That came up in the course. It's just part of the course, like, and so there's a more of a global view now, and especially a Canada-U.S. view, where if something happens, then you naturally send people down or you send people up. It's a very human thing to do. People aren't focused on the borders as much anymore. My country, your country. I don't think, anyways.
And
I know the next time that something happens down, whether it's in Canada or the U.S., I'll probably go. You know, just because you want to. People are people.
well, look at the resources Canada has available. You've hardly exploited your land at all. I'm going to use that word, exploited, at all.
Yeah. And it's getting easier to live in the northern latitudes because of the warming, really. You know, I think the global warming, well, like right now, a lot of our population is near the U.S. border, and it's just because it's warmer. But yeah, the northern latitudes are getting warmer, and there's a migration, and there's lots of land there. Lots of land and lots of resources. I don't think resources are going to be an issue in the future, though.
Yeah.
I think technology will, it won't be relevant where you are.
Yeah.
It'll be a choice. That'll be it. But there won't be the challenges will evaporate as technology wipes them out.
In the short term, we're very definitely headed for a difficult period with the global warming and the disparity between the rich countries and the poor countries. Yes, we're very definitely headed for a troubling period, and it's going to be far more troubling for those countries that don't have much.
You should. Did you ever watch the some of the TED videos from Hans Rosling or any of Hans Rosling's?
I don't. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I probably forgot him if I did.
A super interesting statistician who takes world health data, and it's the way he plots it that it's so easily understandable. And he shows long-term trends in a very simple way that you just go, oh, I didn't realize that. It's worth the 5 minutes to Google his name, Hans Rosling, and watch some of his videos. Because he takes very complex data and simplifies it so that you just visually understand and it's intuitive. And what it says is everything is getting better. Everything is getting better worldwide.
Yes.
And he quantifies it through the best data he can get his hands on.
It shouldn't be that difficult if, I'll say, you look at just information, just look at facts and things. I was born in 1943 during World War II. 50 million people died in World War II in the space of not that many years. Was it 5 or 6 years?
Was it that many
million people died? Yes.
I didn't know it was that many.
No one knows the number. No one knows the number.
Yeah, but it's probably a fairly close estimate.
You know, that's the best estimate. Millions of people have died. And things happened during that war. Countries did things to other people that were just, you know, I don't know, you could say as bad as anything that's happening now, but I mean, how can you think of dreaming of putting people into ovens to kill them? I mean, and the people who did it, maybe Hitler was insane, but the German citizens weren't insane. How did it happen? We cannot say we wouldn't allow it to happen here. We can't say that. World War I, when you look at why the heck did they start this stupid war in World War I? It made no sense. Basically, it came down to like one group of people, the Serbians, wanted their own independence, and then you had these interlocking, treaties and things, and the next thing you know, you got thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying for no logical reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets more difficult to kill your neighbors when you talk to them over the internet on a Google Hangout. But really, that's what the internet does, right?
Oh man, yeah, one-on-one, man, we can solve any problem. Problem. You get rid of that nations, no nation. Yeah. You get rid of ethnicity, I can't say the word anymore. Yeah. None of that stuff. You get people working together, they can solve anything. Yeah, there's so many. There was the big deal about a Muslim woman going to work wearing a headscarf. So what? What the heck difference does that make? So they got a headscarf on. What if they're wearing a beanie with propeller? Who cares?
I'm the biggest atheist in the world, and you know what? If somebody's happy wearing their scarf, so be it. Great, knock yourself out. As long as you're not infringing on somebody else, right? As long as you're not in a big way. As long as you're not hammering someone else in a big way with whatever you're doing, then
I got a couple other stories here. I know that because I got more pieces of paper in front of me. If I can just let's see. Here's I'm going to go to a technology. Did we cover the health stories? There was one, and I wanted to go over it because it was an interesting idea.
Is that the ambulance story?
No. There. It's geneticists tap human genome mutations that can point to new drugs. Now, let me see if I can I can find a piece of story, but I can also read it. It's from nature.com. Let's see. There we go. For decades. Did you find the story?
Yeah, I just got the gist of it now. So sorry. Go ahead.
For decades, biologists have studied gene function by inactivating the gene in mice, inactivating the gene in question in mice and other lab animals, and observing how it affects organisms. Now researchers studying such gene knockouts have another ideal model: humans. The approach does not involve genetically engineering mutant people in the lab as it is done in mice. Instead, the researchers scan the genomes of thousands or millions of people looking for naturally occurring mutations that inactivate a particular gene. By observing how these mutations affect health, researchers hope to gain insight into basic biology and how to unearth new disease treatments. Geneticists discussed several such large-scale efforts during a packed session at the American Society of Human Genetics. So much of what we know is based on mice and rats and not humans, says Donald MacArthur, a geneticist at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And his team have identified around 150,000 naturally knocked off genes, naturally knocked out genes, by trawling the protein coding portion of the genome, or exome. That's
that's the part that makes the proteins of the DNA is the exome.
Right, thank you. And more than 90,000 people. Now we can find people who actually have a particular... we were just talking about this with the whole Black Death thing.
Yep. We
have
were.
a particular gene inactivated or somewhat modified, and that allows us to test hypotheses directly. On average, every person carries mutations that inactivate at least one copy of 200 or so genes and both copies of around 20 genes. However, knockout mutations in any particular gene are rare, so very large populations are needed to study the effects. These loss-of-function mutations have long been implicated in certain debilitating diseases such as cystic fibrosis. Most, however, seem to be harmless, and some are even beneficial to the person carrying them. These are people we are not going to find in a clinic, and they're still really informative in biology. And his group and others have focused on genome data, that they are now also starting to mine patient health records to determine this. 23andMe, everybody gets tested for 23andMe, and let's create one database.
Yeah.
Sometimes subtle effects of the mutation. In a study of more than 36,000 Finnish people, MacArthur and his team discovered that people lacking a gene called LPA might be protected from heart disease, and that another knockout mutation carried in one copy of a gene by up to 2.4% of the Finns may cause fetuses to miscarry if it is present in both copies. The poster child for human knockout efforts is a new class of drugs that block a gene known as PCSK9. The gene was discovered in French families with extremely high cholesterol levels in the early 2000s. But researchers found that people with rare mutations that inactivate one copy of the PCSK9 have low cholesterol and rarely develop disease. The first PCSK9 blocking drugs should hit pharmacies next year, with marketers jostling for a share of the market that could reach $25 million in 5 years. When a person's genome is sequenced to identify the cause of a mysterious illness, any knockoff mutations that turn up are obvious suspects. Having a complete list of such mutations and their health effects should help to identify the first true cause of a disease. To that end, MacArthur's team last week released knockout and other data from some 63,000 people, and otherwise are already making use of this trove. One of the first things I did when they released the data was to look at all my favorite genes for very severe diseases to see if there are people in this database, and there are. And this is John Belmont, a medical geneticist at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. He found 11 people with mutations associated with Marfan syndrome, a disease that affects connective tissue and can cause sudden heart failure if left untreated. However, these people may be silent cases. They might somehow be protected against the disease, or their genomes might have sequenced incorrectly. People who carry disease-causing mutations but don't get sick are especially intriguing, and we should pay attention to them. Here's a whole new database of research that can help us, and help us dramatically.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's huge. And what really excites me is the small devices that can do your entire genome that are coming out. And the Minion finally got rolled out, which if you look at it, I'm just going to try to screen share here. screen share.
Could you put a link in the chat area?
Yes.
I'm going to be providing links to everybody who's going to be, looking at this Hangout anyway.
Okay, here's a good picture. So I'm just going to post that in the chat. So all this health stuff, technologies like this one that I just pinpointed, it's a USB stick, and that will sequence your entire
Holy
gene.
mackerel.
So this is going to get very quickly into the power. Forget 23andMe. You're going to do it yourself, and you're just going to access databases in the cloud. And this is it's going to turn into a hacker movement in a really big way. There's all sorts of really interesting repercussions.
Absolutely, under $1,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oxford
I could see eventually. I don't know. How could you do it? Could you get some saliva or something on a device and you plug it into the internet?
Yeah,
you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that if you got. Well, I'm thinking of cutting down the cost of $1,000, really. But
yeah, it'll be $100.
Oh yeah.
Within a few years, it's going to be $100.
Yes. Yeah. Boy, is that going to be a moneymaker?
Yeah.
I'd get it.
Yeah.
I'd do it. What does 23andMe cost now? I wonder.
Well, health data, it's not available in the States. They reopened it in Canada, and it's $200.
And it takes a while to get the results, right?
Yeah, it takes about 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, the FDA, before the FDA entered in on it with 23andMe, they were charging $50. So they've kind of had a setback because of the health data consequence, and so I think the prices crawled up a little bit. And they do exome sequencing, so the protein coding regions.
Well, that's amazing. And now we can see these kinds of devices that are coming out every year.
Yep.
No more trips to the doctor.
Not really.
You got your monitor here. You have some way of taking a sample and putting a device in it, and that takes copies of things and transmits it to the doctor's office or to that supercomputer somewhere, and bang, there you go. You got your diagnosis. Then you want to talk to the doctor, but when you go to the doctor, you say, here's what I got.
And then you'll use your 3D atomic precise.
There you go. The computer in the cloud tells me what I need, the chemicals I need, what I can put in my 3D machine to produce the medication that will help me cure my illness.
Yep.
No more doctors.
Nope. I totally agree, and it'll be like a Watson-like experience where you'll talk to it, and it'll be looking at your results, and
wow,
it'll be in your smartphone or whatever device we're carrying around back then. And if it's really concerned about your health, then your Google car will pull up front, and it'll drive you to the hospital. We're kind of getting into some. It's so amazing because it's very much a sci-fi feeling, and
yes,
we're on the cusp of it, really.
That story we're talking about, the drone.
Yeah, that was.
This is the drone. Now, in this particular case, he developed. It can fly up to speeds at 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour. Ambulance drone, a flying defibrillator. So you got this device, you put it on the drone, flies to the accident site, and maybe there's a doctor there or somebody there, and they hook it up, and they got their smartphone, they got instructions, you press the button, defibrillator works, that's it. No more worries about it, somebody dying on the street. I'll read parts of it. Around 800,000 people suffer cardiac arrest in the European Union every year, and only 8% survive? What?
Yep.
800,000? Did I read that correctly? Only 8% survive? I
Yeah.
thought the survival rate was much higher. The main reason for this is relatively long response time of emergency services of around 10 minutes, while brain death in facilities occur within 4 to 6 minutes. Wow, I didn't realize.
Yeah, you gotta get somebody like even like I tell a lot of people that where's the nearest defibrillator at your location, and if I had any heart issues, I would be making sure I knew where the nearest defibrillator was, and knowing a person that knew how to use it. One phone call that might save your life, because it has to happen quicker. CPR has to happen very, very quickly.
Yeah, 10 minutes certainly sounds reasonable, or more. I mean, the ambulances I see when they come here, when somebody calls up, maybe 15 minutes. They're pretty quick. I live in a relatively small town. They're pretty quick. But still, in fact, I hate to say it, but a woman just last year died of a heart attack in my building. I don't know, I think she was an elderly person and she had one of those devices, I think.
A pacemaker?
No, a medical device you could touch. So I don't know. Maybe she had been lying on the ground for a long period, lying in her apartment. I don't know. But in any event, I think if you could, I mean, you got to get symptoms. Hopefully, something's happening to you that's not good, so that you can immediately touch that device and get in contact. And then let's say somebody in my apartment, me, I knew how to use that defibrillator. So they had a hospital that could fly in a drone that defibrillator and very quickly to me, and then I run down and zap her.
Yeah, they're not that difficult to use. The course is only a few hours.
Wow, only 8% of survivors in Europe. That's shocking to me.
Yeah, that's...
The ambulance drone can get a defibrillator to a patient within a 12 square mile, 4.6 square mile zone within a minute, it says.
That's amazing.
Reducing the chances of survival. Well, it's going to increase the chances of survival from 8% to 80%.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you also, like a lot of times you have to, it's not just the shock that's good. It needs to be training of somebody nearby that can do CPR. Because a lot of times you're doing 200 chest compressions, and then you're doing a shock, and then you're seeing if, and then you're doing another 200 again. So trained people are still important too.
You need practice, don't you, really?
You do.
I mean, you can go online and you get all kinds of ways of watching so that you can learn how to do it. But I would guess you also need some practice at it. Knowing how to do it, huge help. But
yeah, no, I learned on a dummy, and it simulates the same sort of feeling. It's never like the first time you actually have to do it, where you can hear ribs snapping and cracking, and so until you actually have done it a few times, I think,
There are more people like you learning how to do things like that. I know Patrick, I think, has also had that training, I believe. And I noticed that, I'm going to say it's mostly younger people. Again, it's an example of younger people having the information, learning how to do things. And boy, that represents in the future tremendous resource. People. We're going to be helping each other out by a factor of 10.
Yeah. And let's hope that we'll be injecting the nanobots into our bodies within 20 years, and it won't be an issue anyway, because the nanobots will keep us healthy. It'll keep those arteries clear, and hopefully that'll be the sooner the better.
Many years ago, I'll say in the 60s, a guy wrote a book called Future Shock. and how the future is, people, we're not going to be able to deal with the future. And just, he was talking 20 years, like the 1980s. Well, I got to tell you, in 20 years, it's future shock.
Yeah.
What are all these? There's going to be stuff people need to do, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It scares me a little bit. I don't know.
Somebody's got to build this stuff. Okay, well, you got robots that can build it. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just that transfer I always talk about, where you got things approaching zero marginal cost, where things are getting cheaper and cheaper, and because of technology. But at the same point, people are losing their jobs, and that's got to meet at some point. And it's a little bit concerning, but hopefully it all works out for us.
I will guess the majority of people are not preparing for it. So
no,
there's going to be that singularity, that day where all of a sudden the switch gets flipped, the switch gets flipped, and society changes. But better be ready for it. And I'm guessing, you have I'm talking about young kids all the time, but they have that ability to flip on a switch. Old folks like me, we do not have that. What button do I press? What are you talking about? What pressing?
Yeah, I don't. Technology will make it that young and old will become irrelevant. Other than wisdom.
What jobs will there be? What will people be doing to make money? Will we have to make money?
Post-singularity, if everything works out when we get there, and I believe there will be some form of where everything sort of meets, and money won't have any value. You know what I think will have value? I think art will have value.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. Creativity, individual creativity, be it by a computer or a person.
Yeah, it'll be meaningless for someone to put grass into your backyard or whatever service it is, because the robots will do it. Then the nanobots, will have ultimate control over our environment.
Okay, now I'm beginning to get worried again. We're not doing any work anymore. We're turning everything over to the robots. I don't know. Well,
it worries me too.
now we're into a whole nother problem. What do I need money for? I need money to buy food. Well, my little robot's got that farm, and in fact, I've got a machine, and I can press a button, and that can put protein stuff in it and turn it into a hamburger or a piece of bacon or something.
Yeah.
And boy, it could be. I could see where that would be so tempting, and then we would become the science fiction story blobs you talked about last week.
Yeah.
That is not an impossible outcome.
No, I worry about how we get there.
I don't got to worry. I don't think I have to worry about it. Well, not on. Maybe if they get that machine that can completely fix any problems in my genome, then maybe I will.
Well, think about it. That's what we just talked about, is reprogramming you like a hard drive. Think of the implications. That's right now. That's not next year. They're doing that.
Yeah, you're right. We've just read a couple of stories.
Yeah. So it's absolutely, we're living in sci-fi land, but the general public doesn't have an awareness. And it's not that it takes long to get a general awareness. Like it takes a few hours of talking about it and some level of interest in it. But most people don't take that leap. They'll see accelerated cures for things, and they won't understand why. That's what the average person will see. In the background, there will be the educated elite that will see what's actually coming, and they'll probably mostly have the same concerns. Because I'm concerned about AIs. That worries me a little bit. I'm concerned about having nanotechnology that can build from the atomic scale up and become a device based on self-folding, self-replicating instruments, because they're using DNA now to build circuits, like electronic circuits based on DNA. And the beauty of DNA is they self-replicate, right? They're life forms. So we're creating electric circuits that are life forms. That's kind of interesting.
We could explore the universe.
We can send them out there.
Send us out there.
Yeah, we could. Well, maybe what we're headed for is Star Trek. I don't know.
That could be the. Well, there might be two species, the AI and the human. And just as we go out exploring, I don't know what's out there. Let's go out exploring. We can go out exploring. I mean, if we're talking about the world, even our galaxy, we're talking about the whole universe. That's a huge. We may not even be able to explore the whole universe before it collapses into nothing, if it ever does. That's a mind-boggling space. The universe.
We won't be able to explore our galaxy.
Yes.
Our one tiny, insignificant galaxy, never mind the universe, unless there's some sort of technology that, is like a Star Trek beaming that can beam us across the universe. I don't see it.
You know what you would have happen? You would have people who want to create the kind of society that existed in the past, and they're going to go off and find their little planet, and that's what they're going to do. We'll have different kinds of societies in different planets. That's the answer. That's an answer. There we go. That's an answer.
And the exchange of trade will be art.
Yeah.
I really believe that. What else is there? If money loses its value because of automated robotics and organic systems that make everything available at such low cost, its marginal cost is zero. So effectively, it costs nothing. The only thing that really has value is creativity, because everything else will be provided.
That's kind of always been the case. Not creativity in the artistic sense, but creativity in the sense of science. Every scientist has got to have the same kind of a creative mind as any artist.
Yeah, so any sort of creativity, whether it's art or science or whatever creative endeavor, that will be the new form of value. That's what will bring value.
Let's see if I can get the picture of an artist. How for I can't. And Salvatore Dali and persistence of memory. You've probably seen it. I'll put a link in. I'm sure you. Oh, I don't know, but I'll put a link in the chat area. And I am not doing too well here. I hit delete when I wanted to.
That's all right.
Okay. But if you can see the picture, you've seen the picture, you can go online yourself. It's called Persistence, Salvatore Dali, Persistence of Memory. And it's popularly called Melting Watches. In fact, I can screen share that for you. What happened? There we go. There's the picture. And this is, when did he paint? 1931. Melting time. Isn't that really an accurate picture of time? Isn't that a scientific picture of time?
Well, I guess what they're showing is, yeah, it's a space-time, right?
Yes. And the cubist, Picasso, cubism, breaking down things into their component parts. That's science.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have people like Salvatore Dali and Pablo Picasso. Their picture of the universe matches that of the scientist of the era.
Well, a lot of the science quite often comes from creative endeavors that aren't scientifically related, right? Because art is about inspiration.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Whether it's a painter or a TV show or a movie, scientists, people are inspired and sometimes base their lives on the art that was provided to them earlier because it influenced them so much.
Yeah, there you go. You said art. That's how we humans will prove our value to the robots. We'll put on plays. Human plays and robot and human plays.
I just hope they don't look at us like ants.
Yeah, I talked about that a movie that came out a couple of months ago called Her. And it's about a lonely guy. And he's online and he discovers something like Siri, really, this online presence. And of course, the voice is by Scarlett Johansson, which, you know, ups the interest considerably. So
Yeah.
he actually starts talking to her, and he kind of develops this relationship with her. And then it comes a point one day where she says, "Okay, you know, I'm sorry. You know, basically, we just all us AIs have got together. We find ourselves far more interesting, and you know, basically, you're just not interesting enough, humans." And zap, it's gone. The AIs have gone off into their little computer universe and left us humans, us old boring humans.
Awesome. Cool.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I like the course that I was just on. It was nice to see there's a lot of engineering and science involved with it
Mm-hmm.
on all the instruments that are needed for when you're tower climbing or rock climbing, you know, rappelling. So the carabiners that you use, these devices that latch on, they have so many newtons of force basically before they'll give out, and then you have the gate of the carabiner that has so much force that it can take. We talked about when a person is in a fall arrest situation, how much force basically based on the weight and the length of the fall,
Mm-hmm.
and how shock absorbing systems alleviate that force, and it's all very, very the instruments used, the harnessing, everything is calculated to a very, very finite values,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all worked out. So lots of science and lots of thought have gone into these things, and I think in the U.S. is it OSHA is the regulating body
That's the
for
regulatory
safety?
body. Yes.
Yeah, and here it's occupational health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, same thing. But yeah, it was really neat to see that the science that they're teaching you, they made it in a very basic, straightforward way. But I walked away with a really good understanding of exactly what I'm doing and what the repercussions would be in many, many, many different situations. So that was good to see.
What type of people would you, what type of rescue situations would you expect to be in?
Well, typically, so the problem comes in where if someone's working on a cell phone tower and they're 300 feet up and they get into a fall arrest situation where your harness is pinching off the blood supply to your legs and you've fallen with enough force that you're unconscious, and you get into something called suspension trauma. And so a lot of times firefighters aren't familiar with climbing towers. They don't have the right gear, and they don't practice it. Whereas riggers that go up regularly are constantly exposed to that, and they understand suspension trauma. So what happens in suspension trauma is the blood the oxygen supply, basically, because the blood is cut off at your lower extremities. What happens is after 12 to 18 minutes of hanging there, that blood, when you finally release the pressure and save the person, in a shock situation, generally they put your feet up because you have blood loss, and they want the blood to get to the brain and the heart. If you do that with suspension trauma, it might kill the patient, give them a heart attack, because there's unoxygenated blood that will suddenly travel into that system. So you have to keep them upright for 30 to 45 minutes, and then slowly bring them down over a long period of time and bring their angle down. So yeah, they teach most riggers worldwide on basically how to get an unconscious person off of a tower, and there's some really good effective techniques, but your time is against you. So immediate action, you only have, if someone's unconscious, you have minutes to get up there, and to do a rescue if you're not prepared ahead of time.
Wow, so you got to climb a 200 or 300 foot tower in minutes?
Yeah, so what they recommend actually is riggers that are working on towers should have their safety systems in place every time. So that means it has to be rigged that like a 4-to-1 pulley system in place, or something that could lower you to the ground. And I don't think that's typically done. I think a lot of times those people aren't doing that, because if you think carrying up 30 pounds of rope with you and getting your safety system put in place every single day, that might be a good portion of your day just setting up the safety system. So yeah, I don't think there's tons of accidents, but when there are some, it's good to have the knowledge, and that knowledge transfers into rappelling from buildings or mountain faces, or
right. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, it's like, for me, it's more broadcast tower related. So if we have
interesting. So you received that training, and your company paid for it because it directly relates to the business that the company is in.
Yeah.
And there are employees working for the company that might need rescuing in that situation.
That's what we do. Like, we use a lot of contract riggers that go up, but like, I'll go up and do inspections and do some minor work up there. But yeah, it's just kind of like CPR. It's the same reason why you get people trained in CPR. If you're the nearest person around, you could save a life.
I don't remember much of that type of training happening. And I worked for one company for like 30 years, a bank. There was, you could get types of training voluntarily, but it was basically, okay, here's a little brochure or something. If you want to go, you can take the time to go. I guess the company was paying for it in terms of time, but that was the local hospital handing out a brochure or something. That wasn't the company necessarily encouraging it.
I know my company is very super environmentally conscious. super, super, super safety conscious.
Too bad Ulysses isn't here, because he works on dams and things. He's working on a dam right now. He knows,
Oh yeah,
he knows a lot of that kind of work.
he
He's a
probably
union
has
guy.
training. Probably has the same type of training.
I don't know if he has any kind of. I don't know. I don't know what kind of training he gets. I don't know if it's basically subcontract, working for different companies or something. I have to ask him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if companies in the United States do the kind of thing that your company. I'm sure some of them must.
well,
I
a lot
know
of the training that we got, they referred to OSHA quite a bit, actually. So,
OSHA is not the friend of American businesses.
no?
Yeah, no, American business. That's because they're getting sued by employees, and
Oh yeah.
OSHA does not have the support of the business community, and therefore doesn't have the support of many people and of some congressmen.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, the arm that does the same thing here is, I don't know, it's pretty practical. The expense isn't that great to be safe.
well,
Um,
an example. This is how it happened with us in my bank. We had to do an OSHA, which was a bunch of paper about this big.
yeah.
And you had to fill out all the forms. And I don't know, people were filling out all the forms. And
Oh,
you sent them in. God knows if anybody ever read it. But what would happen if the employee complained, there would be action. But as far as that whole big report thing that went in, it basically became useless, because I don't think they had enough people in that agency who could read all those documents. I don't. If a person complained to do a site inspection. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, here the way it works, like the liability laws, is it doesn't matter what position you're in, like safety wise, employer, employee. If an employee, says to a manager, "Hey, can you go up that ladder and I need you to do this work," and they get hurt, and it's the employee. So yeah, I find it very, for the most part, it's really practical, and it's common sense, very, very much common sense. The paperwork isn't that bad, and there's environments here, like there's lots of big companies that I think it would be a surprise maybe to a lot of people on how safe their environments are. They take it very, very serious.
It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, you know what? At the end of the day, you want everybody to go home, and you don't want fatalities over a job, right? You want people to go home to their families at the end of the day.
It's a good thing Ulysses isn't here, because he probably his view of big business and something like this, the government involvement, is very different. But I think what has happened in the United States is we've had a contentious relationship between business and workers.
Oh yeah.
The motivation in many cases for a company to improve, to make a safer work environment, is because they got sued and had to pay a bunch of money as a result of a lawsuit, a long lawsuit, where the lawyers probably were the only ones who got a whole bunch of money. And it's in too many cases, in more cases than it should be, it's the fear of being sued. It's not wanting to do something good for your employees and create a nice, happy, safe environment. It's the fear of being sued that's going to motivate the corporation.
See, my motivation, I have a lot of employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my motivation is very simple. Most of those employees are either, close coworkers or close friends, and where I know their families, and I never want anything to happen to any of them not on my watch, not while I'm around. And there's lots of like-minded people out there. There's always the odd company that, some are uninformed. They don't know how to be safe, and it's just that. And then there's others that, like you described, that they're trying to save a dime everywhere they possibly can. But yeah, no, we work for a very, very safe company that tries really, really hard to cover absolutely every contingency. And it's not as hard as one would think. It's not that crazy to be able to achieve it.
Yeah, I don't really know. As they say, Ulysses would have a better idea because he works in those kinds of dangerous jobs. But I don't really know that many people who work on the kind of what I would call hazard towered climbing type of work, or work around dangerous machinery or anything. But certainly historically, corporations, I think of my my father and stepmother, they had a press machine. And you had to put the thing in there, press a button, press come down. You didn't move your finger quickly enough, you lost your finger. And whatever safety standards they occurred only because the unions stepped in.
Yeah, that's great.
With strictly unions. And you have that contentious relationship between unions and management, which prevents, in many cases, the kind of cooperation you're talking about. Maybe the new corporate bosses are changing. I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk has a different attitude or something. I don't know. It would be nice if they did.
Like in one way, our environment. It's a massive company I work for. It's huge, and yeah, and in one way, a lot is done for myself and the employees at every level. But also, the company wants to make money, and there's demands that, they want everybody diligent and working hard, and they make sure that happens. So, or that part of the business doesn't survive. Capitalism, right? If it's not making money, then it has to die off. Evolution. It's a form of evolution, right? Companies.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. In the United States, there's basically 5 big banks, and they own the brokerage houses, they own the credit cards, they do securities underwriting, the whole thing. Maybe 5 banks, and I know friends who work in the bank, and it's the survivors have survived by taking no risks or taking fewer risks than everybody else. So it was a risk-adverse environment to the point where the people at the top put in all these controls, and the people at the bottom layer can't really make a lot of decisions. So, for instance, I had lunch with a friend who works at a bank, won't name it, and they have customers. And they have customers with brokerage accounts, and they want to move money in between their accounts and things. But there's a dollar limit. She has a dollar limit. If the customer wants more than that dollar limit, she has to get approval. You got to get approval from her boss has to get approval. You can guess. You're not talking. The customer in today wants now.
Yeah.
I want to move that $5 million from my brokerage account to my savings account, and I want you to send that money to Hong Kong, and I want you to do it now.
Yeah.
And at this bank, you can't. Now, it's okay if all that statement is true of all the other banks, but you got to get people who are saying, you know what, I'll tell you what, Mr. Customer, why don't you come to my bank, my institution? And I don't know. I've got to wonder how these large banks, if they operate the way the one I know, I'm going to wonder about their profitability. And I guess they're profitable because it's a monopoly. They control the market.
Yeah.
That's the answer. And that's why our economic system, every once in a while, hits a bump.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and another bump might be coming.
It will happen. I absolutely. As long as the kind of monopolistic practices I'm talking about are in place, then yes, it's going to be very high. Everything is happy. Woohoo! We're all making billions. And then, bang! People are jumping off of buildings because they lost all their money.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that might be the American economic system.
Yeah.
I'm hoping small companies, all the small companies will begin to, the environment will allow smaller companies to come into the market with new kinds of technologies and things, and they will take over. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm hoping the small entrepreneur are gonna take advantage of all this new stuff coming up.
Elon Musk and his electric cars going to put all the car companies out of business.
Yeah.
And he will, and it will. Unless those car companies start really getting heavily into electronics, into electronic cars and self-driving cars. That's going to be the market in 10 years.
I love
and Elon Musk is going to take over.
There's a great interview of Elon Musk. It was NBC or somebody, was one of the financial arms, and they wanted to understand his company, and they were talking about SpaceX, and they were asking when it would become an IPO, and he goes, well, you don't understand, like, that's not the motivation of the company, and they just couldn't understand him because they're so focused on profit. He goes, like, no, you don't get it. Like, investors want a return that year. Our goals are broader than that. We want to put a community on Mars. and they kept going after the financial angle, not understanding that, no, this is a very human thing that we're doing. It's not profit driven. We want to get to Mars, and I know we have to profit in order to get there, but the main goal isn't the profit. It's creating a habitat that's diversified, so we're on more than one planet. So it was a great interview. It was the guy's a lot like Iron Man. If you've seen that movie, I think he.
That's the kind of person I think is going to take over, as opposed to the way Wall Street is run. That's exactly what happens. If you have Google, or you have somebody who has a good product, a good idea, Twitter, whatever it happens to be, the question at some point becomes, how do you monetize it? Now you got to monetize it, and now you got to start putting ads into people's Twitter streams or whatever, and your product changes. And now it's a money-making product. And that is exactly what is happening with Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. They're changing the product. They're calling it a product in the first place. And if they don't, they're investors in Wall Street, their stock value goes down. And that's a no-no. And it isn't even whether you're making money, it's whether you're making enough money. Gee, your profits only increased by 3. We thought it was going to increase by 5. Stock nosedives.
Well, I like Peter Diamandis is saying, he goes, you either disrupt your own company with new technology, or someone will disrupt you.
That's exactly. There was a book written, I don't know, many years ago. I think the guy's name was Townsend. He said you got to fire your CEO every 5 years. Get rid of him. By that time, he's used up all his ideas. Get rid of him. 5 years, that's it.
Yeah, that's true. You do that with presidents, right?
Yes. One of the greatest parts of our system is term limits. I absolutely believe that. Now, 8 years. Congress, 6 years. House of Representatives, 2 years. Term limits. A problem can be where you have appointees who can be reappointed and J. Edgar Hoover, perfect example. He became God. He could do whatever he wanted because he kept, and I don't know if there's too many agencies like that. There's a few. No, well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
It's a fascinating evolution to me as an older man. and seeing the people in that 30 and 20-year age bracket who aren't seeing the same kinds of change and don't have that optimism that I have.
Yeah.
Because their point of reference is different.
It absolutely is. And when you're in that, usually in that 20-year sort of age bracket, you don't have the wisdom yet to understand what wisdom is, if you know what I mean. You need to be a certain age to acquire the wisdom to understand what that is.
Forgetting those new CEOs who are going to do things differently, we have a huge untapped market. Women in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage women make up of CEOs. It might be 5%. But a woman's brain is going to work just as well as a guy's brain is. We have a huge untapped resource. Women. We need more women executives, more women scientists. We have that potential. That's the good news to me is we have that untapped potential. And once we tap into it, how much better things are going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the more you can diversify, and it's always a good thing. Diversity is good. If you have differences of opinions, different looks on things, yeah, it's all good.
The rubber stamping. Now, once again, drifting off here into my rant land, but American politics is so much bureaucratic, doing the safe thing. All our ads are attacking the other guy. Don't say, here's what I'm going to do for my country. You attack the other guy. Attack. And then when you get in, you made some big campaign promises. Obama, perfect example. You made these big campaign promises. Now all of a sudden, you're going to eliminate, get the soldiers out of Afghanistan and Iraq. Got to get rid of them. Now you get elected. Okay, and now there's an election coming up, and now you got to maybe keep the conservatives happy. So now you got to be worried about how your foreign policy looks to conservatives, and because you need their votes. Instead of doing what you think is the right thing, you've got to concern yourself with getting your people elected, and now all of a sudden you start backing off on these different ideas. And Obama is not like George R. Bush, to me. I don't see. If he didn't start out that way, I don't think. But I think that's what's happened.
Well, that's where, like, I believe in the U.S. system, I think state power,
Yeah.
you want that to be as powerful as possible. And the federal government, I don't think you want them to be that powerful. They do defense. But I think in the U.S., my suspicion is there almost is too much federal power and not enough state power. Because if you have state power, you end up with a larger diversity of opinion, and it can turn into squabbles, but you don't have this centralized source of, power can corrupt.
That is very true. But I don't know where the fine line is. But if a problem is best solved at a local level, but it's not being solved at the local level, then you got to bump it up. You take, for instance, the infrastructure of the United States, our roads, our bridges, our tunnels. Cities don't have the money to take care of them. States don't have the money to do it. The only entity out there is the federal government. Now, the federal government hasn't even had the money to do it, but they got more money than anybody else. So if anything is going to be done about our infrastructure, our water pipes, they're leaking, the roads not in very good shape at all. The roads right outside my door, they kind of do the quick fix during winter, and all of that comes down to not enough money. And the only one with that kind of money to do it's the federal government. So that's the kind of thing where the federal government has to step in and do something.
Right.
Now, I guess you could say eventually if you get the right economic system working, cities will have the money to take care of it.
Yeah, so if your taxes, if a higher portion was paid locally, that's where the power would come from. Then your states and local authorities would have more power if more tax was funneled to them.
Our conservative Republican idea is get rid of taxes as much as possible. Put the money in the hands of the individual and they'll take care of the problem. Some cases that's true. If you're talking about the infrastructure, it's not true. When
Right.
we have we have a budget, and the town has to vote to approve the budget. We got a new mayor in, and he wanted to do some things, some new things, and people asked one question: what's our mill rate? Basically, that's it. That's all they cared about. What's my mill rate? The school system. The new superintendent of schools says, you know, I'm going to hire some more teachers, I'm going to do some more stuff, and the budget was split between the town budget and the school budget. School budget was defeated 3 times in a row because the mill rate. Short-term thinking in little old Seymour, Connecticut. Of course we need more teachers. If you don't get more teachers, your classroom size is bigger, and you're not going to be able to teach the kids effectively.
Yeah, and there are future leaders.
So, you know, not being solved at the local level.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We're muddling through. We will muddle through until the fantastic, awesome technological changes occur, and then we'll do better than muddle through.
From the outside, looking at the U.S. over the last, like being your neighbor for my lifetime, what I saw, my impression from the U.S. from the outside was, if I look at the 70s, the 80s, and up to the mid-90s, it was a country of independent people that didn't take any shit, and they worked their asses off. They didn't care what the government did for the most part. They looked after defense and these other things, but it was a get-it-done country. And then something happened, as far as I can tell, around 95, it started to rear its ugly head, where everybody was looking to government to solve their issue. We've got to go to the government to solve it. We've got to go to the government, our leaders. You need to make us safe. There was a lot of that, and that's what it seemed like from the outside. Is that how it felt on the inside?
I think that's a pretty accurate picture. And I think one thing is, well, take for instance the banking system. After the Great Depression, we get a president who came in, FDR, and they passed regulations controlling Wall Street. Wall Street was chaos. People could put out a brochure and say anything they wanted, and if they could manipulate stock prices. It needed to be government, in that case, government regulation. So they passed something called the Glass-Steagall Act. One aspect of that was it helped to have every states had regional banks. So you didn't have these big banks across the country. You had smaller local banks, and you had regional banks, and you had savings banks that could only have mortgages. If you wanted to get a mortgage, you had to go to a savings bank. If you wanted to buy stock, you had to go to a brokerage house. And gradually, and I think it happened perhaps Reagan, during the Reagan era, that it happened, that they began to deregulate. And then what happened was you could, like, brokerage houses could have margin accounts and could create these things which were in effect checking accounts. So your brokerage houses could compete with banks. And the banks could do securities underwriting. So if you wanted to come out with a stock issue, you needed like an insurance policy, and it was the bank that took care of that. The bank, in effect, bought all that stock, and then it was sold on the market. That's the kind of thing that happened. And then the big banks began gobbling up the little banks, monopoly. And then when you have a situation where you've got the big banks want more people to borrow money because they can make interest. That's their profits. And they become less concerned with whether the person can pay it back. They're just looking at the interest rate. And then they look at the value of the property. I did audit reports on this. Mm-hmm. We had our people going out and saying, okay, this piece of property is worth $1 million. Heck, we can give this guy $250,000. I'm saying, okay, that's today. That piece of property that might be worth $1 million. That doesn't mean it's going to be worth $1 million tomorrow. Can that guy pay it back off his income? Well, they didn't do that. and it snowballed, and we had this huge banking crisis, and then the government. The government, I don't know who it was. Might have been Clinton. I'm not sure. Came out with these two agencies, Fannie Mae and
Freddie Mac.
Freddie Mac. The government letting people borrow money to buy land. Let's make sure everybody can own their own house. Then the government got into the loan business.
Yeah.
And all these people, they couldn't afford to pay back the loan. They didn't have the money, and then they started getting laid off, and the whole snowball thing happened. And what you're talking about, people began to lose confidence in the system, if you will. You had more and more of the blue-collar worker losing their jobs. You went from a bank, a corporation, where you can have a pension. You work for that corporation 30 years, you'll get a pension. You'll have Social Security. And you've got that safety net. Gone. Retirement plans, they're getting rid of retirement plans. They're going to 401ks.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, some people, they had their money. I had a profit-sharing plan. Bank stock was worth $100 a share. And then, boom, it was worth $4 a share.
Yeah, gone. Wow.
Gone. I got laid off twice. I got
Really?
hired at half the salary I was making.
When?
I hung it up.
So you're working in 2008?
The first time I got laid off, I was out of work for 10 months, and then my boss said, well, we need somebody in this other department. I was hired back because they knew me, but not making the money I was before. Okay, so now I'm working for this company. I've got this pension plan out there. I'm looking at this pension. I'm hanging in long enough to take early retirement. When I was 17 years ago, I'm now working for this big bank. The big bank is going to be laying off people. They're going to be laying off people in their 50s. and so they call me in. I go in, and the guy's got a sad face. And well, you got early retirement. You're going to have to go for it. And I'm jumping up and down inside. I'm saying, wow, thank you. I now got my pension. I now have a pension you cannot take from me. And I did some consulting work afterwards. But that was Americans had that. That was the idea. They had that safety net. They had that pension. It's gone. It's been replaced for individuals if they're smart. The bank, the corporation will put X amount, match how much you put in. If you're smart in your investments, it probably works out better. If you're not smart with your investment, and you do the same thing that everybody else in Wall Street does, you invest in a company with a price-earning ratio of 100, then we're going to have another. So you're right. And it was because how we do business changed. It was getting rid of regulations, allowing monopolies to come into place in the economic market, banks controlling the market, banks controlling brokerage houses, and two, that safety net disappearing, that no more pensions and things like that. So, your observation was exactly spot on, I think.
So right now, like since '95 to the last 4 to 5 years in the U.S., again from the outside, so this just recent history, it feels like there's that resurgence of American capitalism with the kind of almost hobbyist thinking, the entrepreneurial thinking, and it's the Elon Musks. There's a lot of people breaking new ground that, taking extreme risks to create extreme rewards. I'm getting that feeling back again, and I hope it's enough of a fire that's been started.
That's because of thank you technology.
Yeah.
Thank you technology. And
there's a lot of risk takers there.
Yes, it's a time for the risk taker now. Yes, you're exactly right.
And it feels good. Like it feels like the hacker movement. People are going back to their basements again, and Google's buying them up, but who cares? Those same hackers that are making products that are really cool, they'll go on and make something else again.
That's exactly right. They'll make something else. Apple, was it, for a long time people said Microsoft. Microsoft is controlling the computer. That's a bad. Then it was Apple. Apple's controlling. Well, now we got Android phones and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Better do something. Apple's got to change.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's that. Yes, exactly. That entrepreneurial spirit is coming back, and it's coming back thanks to technology, thanks to science.
Yeah, and I think, you know what? Because of the internet,
yes,
the entire population of the planet is tipping towards that entrepreneurial spirit that I think the Americans coined. I think that that's where it's sort of a lot of its birthright was from America. So that is now spreading. It's like it was lost for a period of 15 years, where this chaos occurred, and it's coming back, but it's coming back on a planetary scale because people are seeing, well, I like that standard of living. I like how enjoyable and all the rewards that come with it. So everybody wants to innovate now. So
yes, that's exactly right. That's where pick a group, Muslims coming into the country. They come from an environment where you have a very traditional kind of a setup. 4 generations, forget about it. The kids are going to be just like everybody else,
Yeah, exactly. The internet is going to be that, I think, continue to be a stabilizing force.
Okay, I could go on for hours. You'll have to cut me out if you get tired. But I will point out, we're talking about evolution. You take a look at 2 systems, the Russian system of communism, the Chinese system of communism. The Russian system of communism, inflexible. Tight central control, not just political control, economic control. You didn't run your own farm. If you wanted to run your farm, that was done by somebody in a bureaucracy somewhere else. China, political, yes. Economic, they've allowed capitalism to come in. So now you have millionaires. Now you have entrepreneurs in your big cities in China, just like New York City. You don't have political freedom, but you have a lot of economic freedom. And the Chinese were smart enough to say, okay, don't mess around with, none of this, nonsense about having a democracy. But, economically, you want to run your little company? Hey, go ahead, run your little company. And they've allowed that entrepreneurial spirit, that capitalism. The Chinese are smart. The Russians not so smart, and their empire fell apart.
So they created sort of a hybrid system, it sounds like.
The oil boom has kind of saved them temporarily, in my opinion. I think this guy Putin, he wants to be more like a dictator.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much individual Russians are, how much entrepreneurial spirit is allowed in Russia, but I don't think it's anything like the degree like it is in China.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
You don't see a Beijing in Russia. You don't see Hong Kong. If the Russians had Hong Kong, they'd take it over and run it. The Chinese in Hong Kong are letting the Hong Kong businessmen operate basically the same way. There's a problem politically, but...
So you're saying the Chinese understand capitalism?
Yes. They understand evolution.
Yeah.
They understand evolution. They're not going to give up political control. No, no, no. They're not going to do that. And, of course, if the people at top say, okay, we got to build the biggest dam that has ever existed in the history of the world, and we're going to take these 600 villages, and we're going to move these 5 million to 300 million people. We're going to take them out their villages farm. We're going to clear everything out, and we're going to create this reservoir, and we're going to have this hydroelectric dam, and we're going to have all the power we need. And then they run into minor problems. And when you're talking about a minor problem on a project like that, that's a big problem.
Yeah, no kidding.
They still have those kinds of problems. But
Yeah, no.
you know, at least they're smarter than the Russians are.
Yeah.
And they're evolved.
Yeah, no,
Solar
absolutely.
panels. We get all our most of our solar panels from China.
Yeah.
And
Well,
China is innovating in that regard.
Well, I heard again, I don't know how true, I forgot which broadcaster had a special on how the jobs are leaving China now. But unfortunately, they're being replaced where they're moving it back to the U.S., but it's robotics that are doing the jobs.
Okay.
Because now they've made it even cheaper, so they don't need to have and again, I'm not sure how much truth there is to it, but they were showing gigantic warehouses that, you know, there's 3 people and hundreds of thousands of pieces of gear all over the place, just managing massive warehouses. So yeah, the jobs are now their jobs are gone too.
Centralized control. You're at the mercy of the people on top. You got a very smart person on top, you're in good shape. You got a very dumb person on top, you're in bad shape.
Yeah.
So that is a problem with a country like China. They're innovating, but everything comes down to their leadership. What kind of leadership do they have? Same thing with Russia. It's Putin. Everything comes down to Putin. He's basically a dictator right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I do think, though, that, again, I love the internet. I think that does somewhat handcuff him in his ability to run it like an old-style dictatorship.
It will eventually, yes.
People will not put up with it because they're exposed to what all of humanity is doing.
Yeah, well, what will happen is, I think, he's trying to expand his empire. Not going to happen again. He can exercise economic control over one of those new countries because they borrowed money from him. That's what he tried to do with Ukraine. Didn't work out the way he wanted it to. But he's got this oil money, and I don't know that he's got these dreams of bringing back some kind of a Russian empire. I don't know if he has the ability to evolve how he thinks to meet the environment the way the Chinese more likely could. They have a leader who's a bigger leader, but they're a collection, where he's more one guy. And then what happens is just what happened with the old communists. All of a sudden, the people go to the store and they can't buy what they want, and the store is half empty. And then the people get unhappy. And I don't care how much power, I don't care how big your army is, because the army is going to get unhappy, and then you get your rebel. That's, I think, is what Russia's headed towards. I'm not sure about China, but I think that's what Russia's headed towards.
Yeah, they're lucky to have that easy oil cash in, because when you've got oil in today's markets, it's easy to cash in. But you know what? Technology, solar panels, and all that stuff, it's going to wipe out that advantage.
Yeah.
And
those Russian kids, they've got the internet, and they're going to see what's going on. And
That
they're
is,
going to force a change in some way, shape, or manner. They are going to force a change,
yeah,
just like they will in the United States.
yeah.
Because
Well,
we become too monopolistic, as you said, too much reliant on the government. And the young people are going to change that.
yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's happening. I think it started about 5 years ago with
Hmm.
a small smoldering, and there's a fire burning now,
Hmm.
and that's awesome. That's really, really, really good. So,
Hmm.
because that means, and again, I don't care about the economies. Economies are short-term manifestations. I'm more focused on the technology that will change people's lives,
Yes.
and that's the biggie. That's long-term sustainability, where that survives, economic downturns if the
Hmm.
technology, comes up. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. If our schools don't produce enough of the engineers and things, well, people will go online and take courses and learn how to do stuff themselves.
Well,
I
that's
think our education is going to be decentralized dramatically.
oh, for sure. Yeah, maybe it'll be kids getting together wherever they happen to be with their AI teacher instructing them, right? And one day they might be at Johnny's house, and the next day they might be at Sally's house. It doesn't really matter where you are. They want to be with different friends on a different day because their AI can teach them anywhere.
Hmm.
So that would be cool. Um, and the teachers won't have jobs. They'll have to.
They will be designing the software. There'll be something. Or they'll become artists.
Yeah, that's what will be left. Art. So, well, I should probably turn in here.
Okay.
What? How long did we go?
Um, 2.5 hours.
Oh, that's not
I
bad.
believe we started at 11 and it's my time 1:38. So 2.5 hours. I
Wow.
think one of the best conversations we've had in one of these hangouts, I think,
Yeah,
in a long time.
I like that where we use the stories to get going, and then it kind of branches off into a bunch of
Yes.
interesting directions. It's good that way. So we always have a starting point with the stories to rely on,
Hmm.
and then just it
Yeah.
naturally branches off.
And um, try. It isn't just not just a story, not just a little story of that particular piece of technology, but the big story of what it represents. That's the kind of thing I'd like to get into discussing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Branching out. We talk about something and we branch out something related.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun today.
All
Okay.
right, I will end the hangout.
Okay.
And this is a hangout I can highly recommend to everybody, and I will promote the heck out of it. And maybe we'll get 14 people watching it instead of.
All right. I'm not doing it for the 14. I'm doing it for the two of us.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, bye.
Okay, see you later.